Hello and welcome to the 30th installment of my grading of all of the base game cards. If you want insight into the grading system, check out the description or click on the link in the top right hand corner to get to the first video, where I explain it all. But let's get started. We start off today's episode with an expensive space card, Phobos Spacehaven. What does this card actually do? On the one hand, it grants some development in the form of 1 titanium prod, and on the other hand, it grants 3 points. Therein lies the main problem of this card. It is an awkward mix of points and development, and therefore it's inefficient to play in the early game to get your titanium prod up, or in the late game to score and win the game. Phobos Spacehaven is really only worth it to play if you have a lot of titanium and nothing to do with it. But then what do you get? Yes, some points, but also more titanium prod with which you cannot do anything again, except of course if you get lucky and draw some more space cards. Of course, if it's the last gen and you have tons of titanium left anyways and no other target, then Phobos is of course worth playing and scores a good amount of points. But there are better cards for this, like ICS, Large Convoy or Ganymede Colony. But if you compare these cards to Phobos Spacehaven, you might notice something. Out of them, Phobos is the only one that can be played for full effect without the need of any other cards. That's indeed one of the biggest pros of this card. But even considering this, I think Phobos is only a D tier card. Next up, let's get to Physics Complex. This card is the embodiment of an all-engine, no-terraform playstyle. When using it, you give up 6 energy, which could be used to increase the temperature, to get 2 points instead. Of course, when only considering points per resource, that's a much better trade. But increasing the temperature, of course, also grants some development, helps with claiming Terraformer, enables you and your opponents to play plant production cards unlocked on the heat track, and most importantly, helps with ending the game. So when thinking about whether it's worth it to play Physics Complex, you'll need to ask yourself, do I or my opponent benefit from a shorter game? And only when you come to the conclusion that it's your opponent should you play Physics Complex. But then you also need to ask yourself, is it really worth it to develop 6 freaking power prod for this? If you play Thorgate and can get there cheaply, or if you can use Mass or Quantum, then maybe, but often you don't get enough power prod cards or playing them is just too expensive. This all sounds like I'm just trashing this card, but that's not the case. In the right scenario, Physics can score tons of points and win you the game. All in all, I think it's a C tier card. Next up, we get to Plantation. It's very straightforward in what it does. Getting a greenery down for 5 MC less than the Synod project is good already, but then it also grants a plant tag, which of course is super useful for all the green combo potential. The science requirement poses a small problem, as science tags are usually more akin to an engine setup, while plants and greeneries are more rushy. But A, drawing into green combo pieces is great even in an engine, and Plantation just fits right in, and B, 2 science tags are not a high requirement, and there are quite a few science tags that you would always play no matter what strategy you're going for. In addition to just granting good value and combo potential, Plantation is also super useful for either claiming Gardener or the bonus bump on the oxygen track. In total, I can surely say that I really like Plantation. It's a good value card that can be useful during all stages of the game. I think it's B tier. But now let's talk about Power Grid, the second most expensive power tag in the base game, and that's already one of its problems. The only power tag that's more expensive than Power Grid is Beam from a Thorium Asteroid, and that also grants some heat prod and can be paid for with titanium, therefore be part of a Jovian strategy. Power Grid does nothing like that. You have to pay for it with MC and it just grants power prod. You might say that it can grant huge amounts of it, and in theory you're right. If you've played a lot of power tags, it does grant a lot of power prod. But what do you already have when you've played a lot of power tags? A lot of power prod, of course, because everything these cards do is grant you freaking power prod. That's an inherent problem with these cards that I already talked about a million times, so let's stop here. That means Power Grid is an expensive card that most of the time doesn't do a lot. And if it does, it grants something that you already have plenty of. In my opinion, it's an F tier card. There are scenarios to play it, but they are few and far between. And lastly, let's talk about power infrastructure. As I just said with Power Grid, power tags in general are super inflexible and only grant power prod. All but one. Power infrastructure is that one power tag that does not grant power. But does that make it good? No, it's actually super bad. But why? Well, power prot is more expensive and harder to come by than MC prot. Compare sponsors and geothermal power. Both grant 2 prot, but the latter is 5 MC more expensive. So why would you invest in power prot to then convert it to MC? Well, there are 2 reasons. Firstly, and this happens more regularly, you accumulate a lot of power prot, maybe because you're using an oxygen bumper or you just want to increase the heat with it, and then suddenly you don't need that power prot anymore, for example when the oxygen and temperature tracks are maxed out. Then you can definitely play power infrastructure and convert leftover power to MC. But how often will you be able to use this before the game ends? Can you even recoup the cost of buying and playing this card? The second scenario is that you plan to use your power as heat or for an oxygen bumper, but then switch to a more long game strategy. In that case, you will get more usages out of power infrastructure, but A, there would be a better card for this situation, and we talked about it earlier, physics complex, and B, the conversion of power to MC is not the only option here. You could still use it for the originally intended purpose, and that still has some value assigned to it. Both of these cases in which power infrastructure can be useful are quite niche, and you should never just play this card without a plan. And even if it's okay, it's never great. In total, I think this card is F tier, and quite certainly a noob trap. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments whether you agree with my ratings, or if not, how you would have rated them differently. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. And lastly, please check out my Twitch and my Twitter. See you in the next video.